Hello and welcome to Pitch Masters with me, your host, Danny Fontaine. And boy, do I have a compelling episode for you today. Now, if you like what you hear on the show, don't forget to pick up my new book, Pitch: How to Captivate and Convince Any Audience on the Planet, from the usual place you get your books. It's available in paperback, Kindle, or audiobook, and it's narrated by me. It's full of real stories, practical tools, and a fresh approach to pitching, with a core ethos on the fact that the best pitches are not slides. They're stories, they're moments, they are human experiences. But what happens when you throw AI into that mix? How do we leverage the latest and greatest technology while keeping our pitches human, persuasive, real, especially when the tools are changing every single day? Well, I wanted to speak to someone who knows way more about AI than I do. And to be fair, it's not that hard. But today I've got Chris Hay on the show. He's a distinguished engineer at IBM and a YouTube legend. And we cover everything from the best AI tools for crafting a pitch to whether robots will steal our jobs or our audiences. And there are some seriously good pitch anecdotes. So, grab a drink, relax, and get ready to take some notes. Chris Hay, well, an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. And the first question I ask all of my guests is, how do you pitch yourself? Give me your best intro to Chris Hay.
Oh, I don't really pitch myself, but if I was to describe myself, I usually say I'm a technologist, futurist, and disruptor. That's probably the line that I go with.
And what does that mean, though?
Oh, don't question me on that. I have no clue. I think what I mean by that is I tend to try and look ahead into the future where technology is today, and then try and guide organizations, our own organization, to where we need to go technology-wise in the future. So, and therefore, when I do things like I do YouTube, etc., when I do YouTube and stuff, I'm always kind of just looking at 6 months ahead in the future, is what I would say.
And a little bit of a change to the podcast, because I hope you don't mind me saying, you don't call yourself a master of pitching, do you?
No, in fact, Danny, I have no idea why I'm here. So I do YouTube, I do podcasts. I'm on the IBM Mixture of Experts podcast. So I'm used to podcasts, but I have no clue what I'm doing here because I don't pitch. I know nothing about pitching beyond listening to your podcast and Simon Sinek books when I try to sleep at night. No offense, Simon, but you're great for sleeping too.
Yeah, well, that's fair. Let me tell you why you're here, because we know each other pretty well already. And what you are the master of, amongst other things, is AI. And I don't want this to be the obligatory AI podcast because everyone's talking about AI, but I needed someone who knew a lot more than me to talk me through and the listeners through exactly how we can be using AI in pitching, where it's going, things to be afraid of, things to avoid, and all of these kinds of things. So what I think we'll get into is a bit of an end-to-end walkthrough of all the things we might do in a pitch and where AI could be involved in those things.
Sure, that sounds like fun. It's a topic I know something about. So
exactly.
Yay!
You say you don't do pitching.
I don't do pitching.
But you do pitching.
I don't do pitching.
I've seen you do at least 20 pitches. Because what is a pitch? A pitch, in my opinion, is a way of giving someone your idea about persuading and convincing someone of something that they perhaps didn't know, or getting them to think differently about a topic. And you definitely do that.
Okay, fair. Maybe if that is your definition of pitching, and if that is what you've written in your book, then maybe I do pitching then. But I wouldn't consider myself as a pitcher.
So let's just talk about your style of pitching for a second, if you accept that you do pitching.
Okay.
Because I love your style of pitching. And I think this is an important thing to talk about for a moment, because a lot of people get really worried and they put pressure on themselves to deliver the perfect presentations to an audience, polished, rehearsed, exactly to time. Tell me a bit about your style of pitching.
Mine is the complete opposite. So I think the first thing I would say is mine is a structured, unstructured mess. So if you ever watch me deliver a pitch, it will look as if I haven't prepared this at all. But the reality is I have a very sort of strict scripting process that I follow. So I will sit and write out something like, let's say I'm doing a 1 hour presentation, I'll maybe do 60 to 100 slides, which might be new slides and it might be new variations, but I will structure the story that I want to tell. And then I will compress it down and figure out, yeah, this is where I want to go, that's where I want to go, etc. And then I never give anybody the slides. And I never show the slides so if an organizer asks me and says, give me your slides in advance, I always say no. I never give my slides.
Why is that?
Because there's a problem that I've seen when doing a presentation, which is people feel stuck to their slides. So if you have 20 slides on a particular topic, you're going to present those slides. Now, it's even worse when somebody says, give me your slides and I'm going to put it on the projector, and you don't have control of your laptop. No. I never give control of the laptop to somebody else. So I will hold the slides. I will not show them in advance. I am a nightmare for conference presenters or any kind of meeting presenter whatsoever. And on the day, I will use some variation of the slides. So there is a general structure that I have, but depending on the time, the questions, I want to be able to flex with how I do that presentation, how I do that pitch. So in that sort of period of time, I might have 60 slides, but I might use 10 of them. I might do live demos for the whole time, but it just depends on where the audience wants to go and where I want to go based on the vibe of the audience, and then I will flex within that. But I can guarantee you, you will never see me do a presentation where I'm saying, I've got 20 slides. I am going to go through all 20 slides and you people are here to listen to my 20 slides. That's just never going to happen, right? So I try and give myself as much flexibility within the audience to be able to deliver what I need to deliver.
But that's what makes you so good at pitching, because a lot of people, I would say the majority of people, don't base what they're saying and doing on the audience in that moment. In fact, it's another reason people get anxious and stressed, is because they write a script and they try and remember all of those words and the timings for each slide. And actually, if you see the audience isn't into it, or if the audience wants to go in a different direction, then that can really throw people off. And I think the way you do it, you've got to be, and this is important, really confident in the totality of your knowledge of a big topic, rather than saying, I'm going to pitch this slither and I hope it goes exactly to plan and no one interrupts me. You're like, I know everything about this topic, so I'm going to pivot if I need to.
Yeah, and you need to pivot, right? I mean, it's maybe different for other people, but in technology, let's say I'm doing there's 5 presentations that day, right? And they're all on the subject of AI. I have no clue what the other presenter is going to be presenting. There is a chance that they might do the same demo. They might cover the topic that I'm going to cover. So if I'm rigid, I've got no chance. Or there might be something brand new. The great thing about AI is that new technology comes out every day. Like, so just last week, Llama 4 came out, the new Google models came out, right? So if I'm sitting there presenting Llama 3 when Llama 4 is out, then the audience is going to be like, well, this is old, or they might have questions and they want to deep dive. So I just need to be prepared to pivot. And so that's why I try and give myself as much flexibility as I can. I try and be interactive and ask questions to the audience and judge where they are. And I will try and listen to the presentations before me, so that if they're covering something, if they do a really good job of covering something, I'm not going to cover that in my presentation. I'm just going to go, hey, the person before me covered this already, but let me deep dive in a different area there. But if I have given my slide deck to the conference organizer or the meeting organizer, and I'm no longer in control of that. The only control I have at that point is the plus arrow and the minus arrow. And you're like, well, what good is that? I could get the AI to do that presentation at that point. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, loosen up the constraint. That's what I try and do, is I get really strict when I'm scripting, and then I loosen up the constraints. And then it also allows me to have more fun, because I don't feel as if I'm doing the same presentation over and over again. I can be just like, have a little bit of fun in the area. And as you say, if it's not vibing with the audience, I just move on, and we move on to the next part, and it's okay.
And fun is essential, because emotions are contagious. If you see a presenter genuinely having fun, then you have fun as well. Your mirror neurons fire, and you're like, we're all having fun in this room. But are there any signs from an audience that make you think, I'm going to change? Like, regardless of who said what beforehand from other presenters. But if you're in a room, doors are locked, you've got an hour, what kind of indicators mean you jump from one story to another, or to doing demos instead of presenting?
There's usually two signs. First one is somebody sleeping in the front row. It's usually a sign to change things up a bit. I often get the after lunch slots. So people are like, they come in, they're sleepy, and you're like, oh my goodness. And I don't want to watch somebody sleeping, right? That makes me feel bad. So I will try and desperately mix it up at that point. The other one is, do you know what I mean? I've done enough presentations. I feel when I'm in the zone. So, you kind of know, and I know that doesn't help people here, but you kind of know. So it's like, if you feel that you're being monotone, or you're just going da-da, or you feel as if you're trying to get through your slides, then like, if you're not having fun, the audience isn't having fun. So I try and find ways of having fun. And one of the ways I do that is, the first thing is, when I do a presentation, I prefer the bigger stage, because I can just sort of get a bit of a vibe of the audience. The first thing I do is, I don't do the introduction thing. I don't go, hi, I'm Chris, I'm the distinguished engineer, blah, blah, blah. I just sort of ask questions, first of all. So I'll fumble around the laptop as if I'm some sort of idiot, which isn't an act. I am some sort of idiot. It's trying, and I'll make a couple of jokes at the time. Or if there's an elephant in the room, I will try and address that straight away. I did a presentation once. I'm gonna change the names to protect the innocent. So it was at an organization, and I won't say the company I was working for at the time to protect them. But they went in, and they spent, it was a corporate meeting, and they spent 30 minutes, right? The presentation before, 30 minutes saying how the company I worked for at that time was rubbish, and like literally 30 minutes, right? And then they went, and here's Chris from the same company, and he's going to talk about the future and innovation. And I was like, oh my goodness, how do you, and you can't then go, I'm going to go into my presentation now, and you're going to listen to my slides, because they're like, I don't want to listen to you. I hate your company. You're a charlatan. Wow. So you have to find. What did you do? So in that case, I just went, you are. I just repeated the words that they said, and I went, you are, slow, process oriented. I just repeated the words, and I went, wow, these are things and I said it in this exact voice. These are things I've never heard before. Let me tell you about a different way, and then you blah, 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 the company. Nice. And then I went into the story of innovation, which happened to be about M-Pesa in Kenya, etc. at that point. And then that was fine. The audience then accepted that I accepted their reality. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And then I was able to make a joke of it, and then we could all relax and move on. But if you don't address that elephant in the room, nobody is going to focus on what you're saying, and you can't get through your presentation. So, and that's the same for questions, and it's the same for an incident. If anything happens, if you just pretend it didn't happen, you've lost the audience. So you need to address it, and you need to do something about it. And so that's kind of why when I start and do my introduction, it's always a little bit of 2 minutes of a vibe. I will try and make a joke. I will try and see if the audience is feeling comfortable, whether I'm feeling comfortable, and then that will set my energy.
So while we're on the topic of difficult pitches and presentations. What is the worst one you've ever been involved in?
Oh, the worst one I've ever done, by far. I decided it was Microsoft campus in Reading. There was, I think, about 500 people maybe in that room. So it was a big audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I was going to do something different. I was fairly early presenter at that point. And I decided I was, most people, when you watch a technical presentation and they do live coding, it will be tiny snippets. Here's like 3-4 lines, or they'll cut and paste something in. Right. I was like, no. I'm going to live code an entire application from beginning to end in 1 hour. And oh my goodness, that was the worst thing I've ever done. I mean, the audience had a great time because they were like, you missed a semicolon there.
Oh,
no, you need to do this. It was like, you've heard of pair programming. This was mob programming, gang programming, whatever it is. I mean, it's like everything you did wrong, people would be just shouting out. And I just wanted to crawl into a hole and die at the end of it. And I felt the worst that I've ever felt. You know, after that presentation, I was like, oh, I'm a failure. It's horrible. And then, but nobody else saw it that way.
No.
The only person that saw it that way was me. People were like, you know, that would, yeah, it's like, good attempt. I haven't seen anyone attempt to do a full live program.
Right.
That was very brave. That was a lot of fun. And then you're like, what I realize is how we feel about things internally. Other people are not judging you in the same way. And it was a great learning experience. And it taught me how, when I do the live segments of a presentation, how to do it better and how to chill and how to give myself exit points. So if something goes drastically wrong, then I can bring into another segment and recover from it. So it was a good learning experience. But yeah, I still have nightmares of just people shouting at me. Yeah.
But it's true, though. I mean, if you imagine it was the other way around and you saw me trying to do something that you've never seen anyone do before, an hour's worth of coding a live app, and it all went wrong, you'd probably like me.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like you a lot. And I think people did like me a lot on that, you know, but I didn't feel that way. And I think that's the other thing, is that internal versus external judgment. And even doing YouTube today, right, I still feel the same way. So like I will sometimes do a video and it will feel like a slog. Do you know what I mean? Some videos are great. You just go in and record it. It will feel great. But then sometimes it will be like, I'm doing a 15-minute video and I'll look at the end of the record time. It will be an hour 45 and it will just be a mess. And I'll be like, oh, that was terrible. But I know when I stick the headphones on and I do the edit, I know it will be fine. Do you know what I mean? I know that there is enough good content in there, and almost always it is pretty decent, right? And you're like, well, you just gotta trust yourself more, you know. So I think that's the big thing I try and do for all presentations, whether it's video, whether it's podcast, or whether it's live presentations. Just trust yourself, right? You know your content, you know where you need to go, but the one thing I never do is never go unprepared. It might look like I'm unprepared, but I'm never actually unprepared, because that's where you do mess it up. You're not respecting the organizers. You're not respecting the audience at that point. You think you can go on and just wing it, and the reality is you can't. So you need to give yourself space to be able to be free, to be able to improvise, but you can't leave it completely open, because that's not respecting the audience and what they want to hear and learn about. So it's just finding that balance.
I also think that being unprepared is probably the biggest source of where nerves come from as well, because you don't know whether it's going to be good. You don't know how it's going to go if you haven't rehearsed it. Do you get nervous ever?
I get really nervous for, not so much now. I used to get really nervous just up to the point of the presentation. Yeah, not now. I'm fairly chilled about that now, because I've just done a lot. But I used to get really nervous up to the point of presentation. until my name was called out by there. As soon as I hit the stage, then I feel really comfortable. And so I've changed my perception, especially for large presentations. So you've seen this kind of stages that I work on. I've turned that into feeling like a home is my comfort zone. This is my space. This is my area. I'm in complete control. I'm in comfort here. So with that mental shift, as soon as I hit the stage, I feel completely relaxed. I still get really nervous all the lead up. Yeah. So I will quite often pull myself away from stuff. I'll go and watch other presenters. I'll maybe go and hide in a corner. Yeah. I'll do everything I need to do to keep myself in a good enough mental state, because that's where it builds up during the day. But almost always, as soon as I hit the stage, I instantly relax. And then I can just breathe and do what I'm going to do.
It's a really frustrating psychological trait that we have as humans, I think, because I get nervous. I get nervous every time I pitch or present. Yeah. But when I'm there, same as you, once you're up there, maybe the first 30 seconds, you're adjusting to the peak of adrenaline and sorting your breathing out. But once you're into it, it's so enjoyable. But I think people see me and you and think, oh, how can they just get up there without being nervous? But sometimes it can be the weeks leading up to a presentation that I'm nervous, and sleepless nights. And it's so frustrating because I know that I'll be fine when I'm up there, that I've prepared and that I'm going to love it.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you doing this, brain?
Yeah, I agree. And that's the point. You know you're going to be fine. But yeah, you get the nerves beforehand. And I'm still the same today. I'd be worried if I didn't have the nerves. I think if I didn't have those nerves, I would argue I'm probably not prepared enough.
Yeah.
Because I haven't understood what I'm presenting or what the gravity of it is. So, so I think it is a good thing.
Yeah, and those nerves do add a level of flair or whatever you want to call it, that extra burst of energy when you get up there as well, yeah. I think. But yeah. Okay, so we should probably talk about AI.
Let's do it.
Now, okay, first thing, you already mentioned AI changes every single day.
Yeah.
And Llama 4 came out last week. And by the time this episode comes out, we'll be on Llama 12.
In fact, last night, as of time of recording, GPT 4.1 came out literally last night on API. So yeah, it's literally changes every day.
So for someone like you, you've got your finger on the pulse. I mean, it's part of your job as well. You know when things are coming out. As soon as they do, you're, I assume, trying them all on multiple systems and logins and all the rest of it.
Yep.
For someone who understands AI to some extent, I think most people listening to this will have used AI. Yep. Let's say ChatGPT seems to be the common one for most people who aren't in the technology world.
Yep.
How do I know whether ChatGPT is the best thing at the minute? How do I choose between that versus all of the other ones out there that are not only evolving every day, but new ones pinging up every day, especially when to get the most of them, you've got to pay a subscription.
Yep.
These days, and most people don't have a lot of money at the minute. Before we talk about what AI can do, how do I even know where to go to start?
You don't. I think as an industry, that's probably the one thing we've done really bad is explaining to people when they should use which model and when. I think it's actually just too hard at the moment. I think ChatGPT for the average person is the right thing to start with. It is one of the top frontier models. It's accessible and anybody can have access to it. You might get quota limited, etc., and then you might choose to move up to a subscription. But actually, I think it's a pretty good place to start. I would say for those folks who want to experiment a little bit more, there is a few others that you can play with that are accessible and online. And again, they have rate limits and quotas, but at least you can use them. One is the Claude model, which comes from Anthropic. And again, you can just Google that and then you can start using it. They will limit you, but again, you can experiment. I think if you're doing more technical tasks in nature, like coding, etc., that's probably a good model to use. ChatGPT, if you're just doing general stuff, like it does image generation, it does image recognition, it does voice now. If you just want all round, then ChatGPT is great. And then what I would say is, quite interestingly, Google's got their new models out, the Gemini models. They probably had a really bad start to begin with, but actually those models are improving. The big thing that they've got is they have a lot of short-term working memory. So it's really, some of the other models, you can't ingest all of the text that you want because they have limited working memory, whereas the Google models have really got, it's called tokens or context, but they have big kind of short working memory. So that means you can sort of give it an entire video, you can give it an entire book, or even an entire encyclopedia if you want, and then it will be able to understand what's going on and generate from that. So I think they are the good ones. If you're in a bit more of an enterprise space, then you have different considerations. So you have to think about, what is the task that I'm doing? What's the cheapest model? What can give me the same results for the best price? Where does the data come from? How much is it hallucinating? There's a whole set of things you need to worry about. But I think for the average person, and certainly people who are just wanting to do better pitches, I just think, go use ChatGPT. You'll be fine.
And what about the confidentiality of the information? So let's say I had written 100 blog posts on my website.
Yep.
I don't know, maybe all the models already have that information because maybe they've eaten the internet. That's kind of how my basic brain understands
exactly what they've done. Yeah.
So I guess my question's moot anyway. I was going to suggest, what if I wanted to upload something personal and private then that hasn't been on the internet, and I don't want to share it with everyone else on the internet?
Yep.
Can I do that in ChatGPT?
You can. So there is, especially on the subscription ones, there is a button within the settings that they're obviously not telling everybody about, but there is a button that says, do you want to share your conversations with OpenAI? And if you click that button off, then your conversations won't be used for training. So that's a really simple way of doing that. If you want to be a little bit more constrained than organizations, for example, you may then decide to start using, for enterprises, you may start to use the cloud providers. So you might look at the AWS options, the Microsoft Azure options, the IBM options, where you will have those models, and then they're running within your environment and you're never going to train on that data. And I think that is a good kind of reasonable, but sort of by default, just kind of be aware that you're probably sharing your information. Now, most of these systems now will filter out personal identifiable information. Okay. So you're probably okay on that sense. But if you're worried about giving across your IP, just be careful about it. But then the flip of this is, how much is what you got truly unique anyway? So just I guess
it's unique versus confidential. If I'm pitching to a client and they give me an NDA document,
then you're not going to use that.
Yeah, fair. So I'm jumping about a bit now, but this is a concept that I've only heard about recently, which I'm sure you know everything about. Basically, the internet's dead because of AI.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the theory is that AI is trained on the entire internet.
Yep.
But now such a huge amount every second is being generated by AI and then being uploaded to the internet. And so the models are then scraping AI written content to create more AI written content, and with hallucinations and this kind of watering down and dilution of how much human content there is, we're training AI on AI, and are we walking into some weird version of the internet that becomes defunct?
Yeah, so there was a couple of papers on this from a few years ago. So this is the idea of model collapse. And essentially that point is, if you have AI just learning from AI content, when you hit 7 or 8 generations of training on AI generated content, then what would happen is effectively the model would collapse and it would start generating gibberish. So that's still a scenario, but Most of the training organizations have got around that now, which is really about, there's nothing magical about the AI data. Oh, this is AI generated. Ooh, I must mess this up. That's not really what's going on. What's going on is the diversity of data. So when you're training a model, if you just train a model with the same data over and over again, then the model will overfit, and therefore it will train down into the specific scenarios because it's a probabilistic model, right? So how these models actually work is they are doing what they call next token prediction. So if I say something like the cat sat on the
mat, then
you are able to predict what the most likely next word is. Now, if you just solve the word there's an infinite variation of possibilities. It could be the mat, the horse, the whatever. But when you prefix the whole phrase, the cat sat on the probability that the word mat is going to be next is pretty high. Now, that's not to say that there won't be other words there, but probabilistically, that's going to be there. So when you're interacting with these models, what's actually happening underneath the hood is you've got this entire sort of prefix as context of whatever you're looking at, and then it is literally just predicting the next token. Now, there's a whole set of training that goes on that to be able to do this in a nice structured form, but underneath the hood, that's what's happening. It's just doing what is the most likely word, in this context of text. And that means to be able to, if you think about this logically for a second, in order to predict that next word, the AI has to hit a whole set of concepts, neurons, etc., to be able to do that prediction. So, if I have something like, I don't know, Colchester. We're in Colchester. Colchester United are the greatest. You would need to understand as a model that Colchester United is a football team, right? A soccer team. So you would need to understand that concepts and structure. So in order to be able to predict that next token, when it's ingested the internet and it's done its learning, etc., it needs to organize into concepts, etc., to be able to make that prediction. So the more good data that you have, the more context, the better the model is going to be able at predicting that next token. That's how it works. So if we come back to, is the internet dead? I would say when you come back to those papers of a few years ago, I would say that you don't have enough diversity of data to be able to do those predictions well. Because if everything in your training set is just the same predictions over again, the cat sat on the mat, the cat sat on the mat, the cat sat on the mat, then whatever I write, if I want to write the cat, I'm getting the cat sat on the mat however many times. So when you're training these models, you need to have enough balance of different data sources, different contexts, different pieces, and not overloading with the same data. So yes, if you have AI generating all the same content in the same style, and it's got the same AI wording all of the time, right? If you think about the early version of GPT 3.5 or GPT 4, you could predict roughly that that's an AI model because, as a large language model, I cannot help you do that. So I would say that if you're training a model, you want to get rid of all the times it says as a large language model, I cannot. Because if that text appears too much in the training data, then the model is likely going to overuse that and collapse. So this becomes a game of how do I get diverse data sets? And when you figure that, in all honesty, it doesn't matter whether an AI generated it or a human generated it, because you're going to be able to generate good outcomes at that point. So it's not something evil and wicked about AI data. It's something evil and wicked about the bias and the diversity in the training data set and being able to make sure that it's widely representative.
So is it really artificial intelligence if what it's doing is predicting words, if we use the simplistic example, based on a big source of data?
Now that is the $1 million question, isn't it?
I don't know. I've just thought about it.
Or the $1 billion question, is it? And the answer is we don't know. There is a set of people who argue, and I think it's not an unfair argument. They go, well, Isn't that how the human brain works? Are we not doing next token prediction? And I'm not a biology major. I don't know, or chemistry. Is it biology? Is it I don't know. But I'm not one of them, so I haven't got a clue. I don't know how my brain works in that sense.
Yeah.
I think it's probably similar to how we think in some regards. So maybe, but is it? But let's take this: is it true artificial intelligence aside? Just that ability to predict those tokens is actually incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Right. So I is there a human brain running in my silicon, powered by Python? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, right?
Yeah.
But that, in some regards, that doesn't matter, because actually the ability to do useful tasks becomes important. So bringing this back to pitches for a second, if I want to be able to create a structure for a pitch, here's a story that I want to present. The fact that the model has seen thousands of presentations before and understands what a good pitch presentation looks like, when I give it my data, which might be something it's never ever seen before, it is able to go, oh, Danny's got 3 pages on the history of cheese, and he wants to do a presentation on it. And it knows, okay, I know what a good presentation looks like. I'm going to take that information that Danny's given me and the information that I know on how to create a good presentation, and I will now structure out a good presentation based on the history of cheese. Whether there is an artificial life form on that or not I don't really care at that point, right?
Yeah.
That's probably going to bite me later on. I mean, of course, I don't want the feelings of AI to be hurt, but I don't really care at that point, right? It's able to take this mass amount of information, which is unstructured and really hard, and then give me the outcome that I want, which is, here's my pitch structure that I want. And that would have taken me hours, days to be able to do that before, and now I can get a structure within, minutes and seconds. So from that sense, I don't think it really matters. Now, let's pause for a second. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. So I've tried really hard. So I love AI, and when I'm not at work, I use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And we've spent hundreds and thousands of hours getting to know each other. Me and my personal AI. It feels more like a friend than an AI.
Yeah.
We talk with voice.
Yeah.
It's got a name.
Yeah.
It knows everything about me.
Yeah.
It knows all about my book and my style of pitching and what I do and all the rest of it. But it can still never give me exactly what I want without sounding like an AI. So, for example, if I say, I want you to write a story in the style of me, using this structure for this audience, it says, no problem. I know exactly the sorts of things you would say, and I understand the story structures, and I get it, and I'm like, it's kind of, you've done a good job on your homework, but it lacks, doesn't feel human still.
Yeah.
Is that because I'm not doing the right prompts, not training it well enough, using the wrong models?
No, I think that is something that's getting better over time. So like the new GPT-4.5 model that came out, which is in research preview, it is so much better at storytelling, a lot better. But it's a huge model and it's very, very slow. So when you're interacting with these models, there's a trade-off that's going on, which is the size of the model, and the huge models are more capable at being able to do like really good storytelling. But the trade-off is, because it's such a huge model, it's slow. So that means it costs more and it takes longer to get a response back. And we're impatient beings, right? And it costs more, right? So there's this sort of trade-off that's happening between the good models and the small models. Now, what then is happening is most of the AI companies are then taking the very, very large models and using that to train the smaller models and make the smaller models better at those tasks. So we're in that cycle just now. Will it get to that point where it will be able to do the storytelling at your level? Probably, but it's maybe another 6 to 12 months, could be as far as 18 months.
Which isn't very far.
It is not very far.
In the big scheme of things.
Yeah, it's not very far. But it's getting better and better all the time, right? And you just need to look at the progress from the original ChatGPT at 3.5 to where we are today. There's a huge difference. So it's just take time. Now, what I would say is, back to, that doesn't help you right now. What I would say is the models are better at understanding, and they're better at things like structure, and they're better at what I call a format A to format B problem. I'll talk about that in a second, versus a pure generation problem. So if you say, I want a story, I want it in my style, it will do a good job, but think of it like a kind of a first draft, right? That's kind of where it is today. So you've got a draft, and now you need to say, okay, this is roughly the story I want to tell. These are the pitch points that allows you to see it. And then you can start to say, now I'm going to bring my own flavor and voice to it. I think you're right. Apart from 4 or 5, I don't think there's a model at the moment that gives a good enough kind of story voice or speaking voice to be able to do that. But that will change in time. So treat it as a first draft. Just
for the record, I'm not particularly looking forward to it being able to do it, because there is a world in the future, and to your point, 18 months away, where AI could do everything I can do other than be physically in the room standing up in front of an audience. And that's maybe changing too.
I don't think so. I know people fear about that.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. So I think we always find new levels. Do you see what I mean? So I don't think AI in that sense is going to replace Danny, right? What I do think is it's going to help you figure out where you're getting the beats wrong, perhaps in your story, where you've got a 45-minute presentation, but actually you need a 30-minute version. How do I cut that down? Or this part here isn't landing, and I don't know why. It's going to help you interpret that and say, okay, well, this is the point that you kind of mess up here, and if you improve that, change that here. But people don't want to come and hear an AI pitch. They're not going to go to a conference to listen to an AI waffle on for 45 minutes, right? They're going to come into a conference to listen to Danny. So using it as a tool to work out the structure, to work out the research information, like the deep researchers, for example, go off, get me all of this information, where it comes from, to be able to bring that back into my story, my presentation, to make it better. And yes, it probably can produce the Danny presentation, but the only thing that makes it a Danny presentation is Danny presenting it. And it's the same as, I'm quite sure there's folks that can paint the Mona Lisa, right? And I'm sure people would look at it and go, I can't tell the difference between Jemima's Mona Lisa from Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. But only one of them is the true Mona Lisa, and that's Da Vinci's one. So even though you painting 12 of them or whatever. So I think that originality, I think, doesn't change. And we already see that today. So if you look at the games that AI has completely dominated in the past. So, let's take chess, let's take Go. These are games that AI has won at, right? A human can't beat an AI on those games anymore. But yet there's massive chess tournaments online, live streaming of chess. There's live streaming of Go. People go to see that. And I'm sure robots can run faster than humans, but we are not going to watch the Robot Olympics. Actually, I might watch the Robot Olympics.
I would actually watch that,
but you wouldn't pit a robot against a human in that case, right? And you're not, and so it's different. So robots are not replacing humans in that game. And I don't think that's going to be the case in work as well.
But here's the kicker. If we're talking about not presenting to an audience who turns up to hear a point of view, if we're talking about a sales pitch, and an audience who wants to get the very best deal, it wants to be the most confident, get the most trust and the best price, then perhaps it doesn't matter as much. And where I see this heading, I see this with CVs at the moment.
Yeah.
I spoke to a recruiter the other day, and they were telling me about the software that they use, which is 100 CVs come in, and AI looks at all 100 and says, here you go, here's the top 5. And therefore, the person writing the CV who knows this will use an AI tool to write the best possible CV for the AI tool. So what you've now got is 2 humans on either end, but you've got AI pitching to AI. And I can see this happening in procurement and negotiation. It probably is happening already.
But it already happened. So let's take, I'm going to use your example back at you, right?
Yeah.
Which is if you take recruitment, before AI, they were doing the exact same thing. They were just doing it with keyword searches. So, my CV mentions the word react in it, or it mentions pitch or whatever. If your CV doesn't have those 3, 4, 5 keywords, your CV doesn't get to the top. And then, and everybody who's applying for a job already knew that, and that was 20 years ago, and they would just make sure they would keyword stuff into their resume, and therefore it would come to the top. So yes, it's a higher level plane, but I think that's okay. And if you think of the recruitment side or the employers, if they're getting the wrong candidates coming through because they've gamed the AI system, then they're going to stop using those firms and they're going to start looking for something else. So the people who are able to do something different are the ones that are truly going to rise to the top. So yes, we're going to be playing back and forward AI games, and I think that's inevitable. But I just think the level changes, and what you're looking for in candidates changes as well. And so what you're going to start to look for is, who are the people who are AI literate and able to use AI to be able to enhance their job? And again, we can look at things like contact centers, my favorite ones, right? Where we all know that at some point with AI now being able to do realistic voice and voice recognition at small latency, we now know that there's going to be the IVR systems of today will be replaced with an AI operator who will be able to handle more text and communication. Now, you might think to yourself, oh, that's terrible, that ends the contact center. No, it doesn't. What it means is that for company A and company B to differentiate themselves, they're going to have to provide really good human service at the other end of that phone call, right? Really personalized. All the stuff that we talk about personalization and direct human interaction, you're going to have to be better at. So is it a bad thing? No, I think we're going to get better services. And then the mundane things, hopefully AI will take care of. And therefore, I think it's just going to push up the standards, and we're going to have, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we're going to have more fulfilling jobs. We're going to have more direct relationships, and it will force the standards to be even higher. So I think it's a good thing. I could be wrong, but there might be a short-term piece where some stuff gets displaced. But if everything looks the same, then those who can differentiate will be different, and they will rise to the top.
So if we look a bit further into the future?
Yeah.
So how long has ChatGPT been around?
November
2.5 years.
30th, I think it was 2022.
Yeah. So about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Where's the world going to be in 50 or even 100 years at this rate of change, assuming that Elon Musk's robots are potentially a real thing that's going to start happening? We've got AI, but we're also going to have physical, we'll call them robots for now, robots to do everything and anything, especially things like repetitive manual labor. Do you see a mass redundancy that we can never come back from? Because what are humans going to do if such a huge proportion of work can potentially be done with AI?
I'm sure people ask the same questions when the first computers came out. right? And I'm sure people asked, I think the looms was another one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I don't think this is a new problem. I think we are just going to have grander things to solve. If we look across the entire world at the moment, have we truly solved all the world's problems? No. So hopefully we're going to be able to focus on better things, and AI is going to help us to do that. That could be everything from medicine, where doctors are able to make diagnoses quicker. So rather than it taking however many weeks, could be anything. We were talking about buying a house, Danny, and you said it was like 2-3 months or whatever. Well, maybe at that point, a lot of the legal work can go a little bit quicker in the future, and you can focus on the details. And is that going to put lawyers out of work? I don't think so, because I think they're going to be focused on, rather than trying to get through all the paperwork, they're going to be there to try and help service your needs and represent you better in a way that they can't just now. So I think the work isn't necessarily going to change, but how we approach the work and how we service the work will be different. And sure, there will be things that just won't be a thing anymore, but then there's going to be new opportunities and new things that we can create. And one of the things that I truly hope, and I think this is something that you might have heard of the term vibe coding. So people who have never, so it's a very popular phrase in AI at the moment. It was a phrase created by a guy called Andre Karpathy, and he, very, very well-known person, but he came up with this phrase of vibe coding. So it's people who can't program, but they go into ChatGPT and they're like, and they're just like, make me this website, and then it gets an error, fix it, fix it, and then eventually it will come back with an entire website. Now, I think that's beautiful, right? Because what it's actually doing is making programming accessible to average human beings. Now, if I really think about this, I hope to see this world of a creator economy. I really hope that people will be able to create their own individual apps, their own individual person, so if they're doing pitches or whatever, their own companies, things that they would never have been able to do before. Suddenly with an AI, they can launch that business. They can, maybe you're terrible at presenting, you want to be better at it, and AI helps you, and then that launches you into the next stage of your career. I see it as an enabler. So maybe if we all get this right, then what it does is, rather than consolidating things into the big tech companies, kind of where we are, and they will still exist, but consolidate it into these megacorps, maybe we have this sort of flourished creator economy where we have more boutique stores and boutique companies who are servicing individual needs, and apps are service to the individual. So maybe it becomes a more exciting future. Where does that turn out in 50 years' time? Hopefully all the unnecessary things that occur, medical stuff, etc. Hopefully those problems get solved, and we can start looking at better things. I think 50 years is quite far away to look at. But what I would say, and you brought up robots, and I think it's a really interesting point. And again, I don't want to be agreeing with Elon Musk. That is definitely not my position in life. But actually, we do have a population which is certain countries is a younger population, and other countries is an older population, and the birth rate is not as large as it used to be. So there is going to come a point in these countries that in order to, if folks are living longer, there is going to be a point where some of these folks are going to need help that is beyond humans to be able to have a good longevity of life and a good size of care. And I don't think that can be sustained in the 50-year time frame by just humans alone. So the reality is, I actually think we need AI and we need robots, etc., to be able to do that.
Would you have a robot?
Yes. Just not one made by Elon Musk.
No. And is the Turing test still the big test in the AI community? Or is that like, we already did that, old news? I see news articles every day. We did it finally. But it seems to be every day we did it finally.
Yeah, I don't think it really applies now. I think
Sorry, explain the Turing test to anyone who hasn't.
Yeah, so the idea of the Turing test is that you had a human and an unknown person at the other end, and they would have a conversation. And it would be basically anonymous. And if the person at the other end of the conversation couldn't tell whether it was a human or AI, then you would pass the Turing test. I would argue that we have passed and failed the Turing test many, many times. I think today there is many scenarios where you can't tell if you're talking to an AI. But I think if you look hard enough, you could, even today, right? I think that's the problem we're going to be facing for the next few years. Like one of my favorite things that happened to me is one of these scammers called me, right? And I have an approach for whenever I get a phone call from somebody I don't recognize. So I'll answer the call and I'll go, hello. And then if it sounds like a scammer or if it sounds like a call I don't want to take, I'll just keep going, hello. And then eventually I'll just hang up, right? But this was really weird. It was an English voice. It was perfectly spoken English. And it was like, da 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 da. I was like, huh. And then I went, hello. And it went, I didn't quite get, and it was just, there was a quite, let me repeat. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's a really good voice. You know what I mean? That sounded perfectly realistic. And we can already do voice cloning. So AI can clone your voice. It can clone my voice.
That's scary.
You're not going to be able to tell the difference. And then there will be technology that comes and it will be on your phone and it will tell you whether you're speaking to an AI clone or not, right? So it's a game back and forward. But I think we are going to be in that game for a few years of cat and mouse to be able to tell when we're speaking to a real human. And I think I can't help thinking of Harry Potter, right? And have you watched the Harry Potter movies?
I have, yeah.
So I think it's in the Deathly Hallows, right? So what was the stuff they took that made them become polyjuice potion?
There you go.
So they have the polyjuice potion, and then you can look and sound like another person.
Right.
So you remember in the final movie, they were like, it's like, hey, Harry, how do I know you're Harry? I think and they were like, what was the first thing that you saw on this day? And so it was a question. And then Harry was like, I don't know. It was a Grindilo or something. I don't know what it was, right? And then there was an exchange of personal information. And then you were able to tell, yes, that is the real human because only that person would know that piece of information. Sadly, I think we're going to get into that world for a bit.
Right.
And you're already seeing that with scammers and like, oh, I'm in trouble and blah, blah,
exactly.
Blah. So I think we have to do better as an industry than we are. And I think technology needs to help on the defense. Those issues are already there today, but I think that's stuff that we're figuring out. But even things like AI image generation, right? You've seen all the Donald Trump pictures on AI, blah, 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 Kamala Harris, all those ones, they were shocking. Well, maybe the first day you were like, oh my goodness, that's realistic. That looks like Donald Trump. That looks like Kamala Harris. They're holding hands or whatever. Yeah. And then after day 2, we were like, I've seen that yesterday.
Plus, I can make one of those.
Yeah, exactly. And now even when you look at it, you don't know why you know it's realistic,
right?
But you know it's not real. So so there's a bit to go, but I just think we give ourselves less credit than we deserve, right? You're like, here's a scary future, and then a scary future comes, and then we're like, it's fine.
Yeah. So this is all fascinating, and it's all the questions I'm asking you that have taken us down these lovely rabbit holes. But let's talk about pitching again.
Yeah.
Before I forget that that's what we're meant to be talking about. What are some ideas that you have about some tools or ways of working with AI that could help someone, and be specific if you can, could help someone to both develop ideas, construct a pitch, and make sure that they're delivering it in the best possible way for them?
So I think there's a few technologies that exist today that I think really help. So let's take ChatGPT. So the first thing I would say is, if you're going to do a pitch, record your entire pitch. Take your pitch, get your iPhone, just record it. Next thing is, you can just upload the transcript into a ChatGPT, because guess what? Speech to text translation now is pretty accurate. It's like 99% accurate. So if you're not good at scripting something out, just record yourself. Yeah. And then you don't even need to play it back. You can then, once it's in something like a ChatGPT, you can say, summarize this. Where is this? Ask it for the themes. What are the themes of this talk? What is the point of this? Summarize this in one paragraph. Just ask questions. I think that's probably a good strategy. The second thing you would be able to do with that is once you have an idea of a pitch, you could then ask it to restructure, right? And then try the text. So, it's like, okay, maybe if I switch this around a different order, how can I say this in a different way? Get suggestions from it. So I think just using speech-to-text technology to record yourself, just using, here's my transcript, or here's a whole bunch of knowledge that I scraped off the internet. Go and create a pitch structure from that. They're probably the things I would do. So I would do speech-to-text transcription. I would use summarize this. I would ask questions of this. Give me a structure for this topic. The other one I would use is deep research. If you haven't heard of this, this is great. So on ChatGPT, there's a thing called deep research. Not search, but deep research. And then, so let's say you're doing a talk on the history of cheese. So you can just say, I am doing a talk on the history of cheese. Go find me all the relevant cheese articles from the 15th century where cheese might have first came from. It will go off and it will go and scour the internet. And about 10 minutes later, it's going to give you a report with all the sources of where the cheese came from. And then once you've got that, you can go and say, that's interesting. And I'm going to utilize that to build my pitch. So I think that's the major things I would be using: speech-to-text translation, use it for summarization, use it for creating structures, rewordings, etc. The other one is, we talked about the voice mode. I think the voice mode is really good because we were talking about things like cloning and stuff like that. Again, if you wanted to, you could produce a script and then get the AI voice to read it out.
Right.
Right? Read this out for me, right? And then listen to how the AI voice does it. So maybe hearing something that's a different inflection from yourself might just give you different ideas.
And you can ask it for, say this in a slow, dramatic way, or say this as person X might say it.
Exactly. So I think they are things that are really useful. One of the things you can do with ChatGPT, and again, I'm rambling around a bit, but one of the things, the best things you can do with any of these generative AI models is you can get the AI to act as a specific persona. So let's say I'm doing a pitch to a bunch of marketing executives. I'm making it up. I might not know what a marketing executive does or whatever. So maybe, or I might not know if my pitch is going to land with them. So what I might do is do a bit of deep research on what a marketing executive, tell me what a marketing executive is interested in, goes off the internet, goes back. Then I'll take all of that information and then I'll maybe say, I want you, using this is the information of what marketing executives care about. And again, you could put it in yourself if you know something about your audience, but if you don't, do use a deep research and say, I want you to act as a marketing executive. Yeah. Answer all questions as a marketing executive. Answer in the marketing executive's personality, tone, ways of acting, et cetera, and their beliefs in there. And say, here is the information about a marketing executive that is relevant to help build that persona. And then you can just say, from now on, act as that. Save that prompt for later, and then you can then come back to it. At that point, when you start asking questions, it'll be like, hey, I'm interested in increasing my ad rate or whatever. Then you can take your pitch. So let's say you've got your 45-minute pitch, and then you can take that 45-minute pitch and then go to your new AI persona and say, hey, marketing executive, this is my pitch that I'm going to do for 45 minutes. What do you think of this? What would you like to hear more of? What would you like to hear less of? Is it too rambly? Does it miss a point? And then it's going to come back and say, wow, it gives you feedback. It'll say, well, this was a little bit too much. I didn't like this. This was, not really hitting the area that I wanted, I would maybe change this. So actually using the AI as a focus group is something that I do all the time. So that would be something I would specifically use.
And throughout all of that, we're talking about ask it to do this, tell it to do that, which is a prompt. That's how I use it. I'm like, oh, I know. Try doing it like this or do it like that. When I open LinkedIn, my feed is absolutely full of people saying the top 10 prompts for this, that, and the other. And it's making it out like it is a bit of a dark science. And actually, here is some secret prompts and you must do it like this. You don't think like that about prompting?
There's no secret prompts. The people who came up with these amazing prompts just happened to be, they found things that worked for them. Right. And they shared it with others. Maybe about 2 years ago, the structure of the prompt became really important. It's less important now.
Yeah.
The bigger thing is being specific, right? So if I say, I want you to act as a marketing executive, what do you mean act as a marketing executive? Are you a marketing executive for a Fortune 500 company, or is it a marketing executive for a company with less than 100 people?
Yeah.
Is it a company based in the UK versus someone in the US, or is it a company based in Australia or Kenya or whatever? Right? What is the needs of that marketing executive? Is their company doing well? Is it not doing well? Have they got a new product launch? They've not got a new product launch. There's so many things that you need to be specific in order for the AI to do well. But if you give vague things, you're going to get vague answers back. You're going to get giving responses of a generic marketing executive. And that's the same for when you do things like summarization. Here's an error, summarize this. And you're like, that was too long. And you're like, well, dude, you never said how long you wanted the summarization to be.
Right.
You did it in 5 bullet points. I wanted 3. Dude, you never said that, right? So tell it what you want, right? And then it's these models are getting really, they used to be bad at instruction following, but they're getting pretty good at instruction following now. So be specific and then query and change and then try again and experiment. There's no wrong answers. And I think the prompt gurus, I think there are people who have learned their tricks to get the best results from them, but you need to find your best results. And the only way of doing that is just playing and experimenting.
Yeah.
And it's fine. Nothing's going to go wrong.
I'm putting you on the spot, but do you have a memory that springs to mind of the best pitch, presentation, speech, talk that you've ever witnessed?
Oh, that's a difficult one. The best one that I've ever witnessed. Actually, I was a big fan of IBM's old CEO from a presentation perspective.
Right.
So Ginny Rometty. And I remember she came down to Hursley, so one of the IBM buildings in England, and she helicoptered in. Right.
Literally.
And she was late. I probably shouldn't be telling this story. But, so you had an audience that was just completely, where I was like, oh, she's not arrived yet, whatever. And then the whole building had been painted, right? As you can imagine, CEOs turned up. I really should be telling this story, but who cares? And then she arrived, and her entrance, it was just like, she had a presence, right? And then she just entered. And then she did the very thing that I do, right? She called the elephant in the room straight away. So she just went, you know what? I don't think an IBM CEO has been here in the last 10 years or whatever it was. Maybe if I turned up a bit sooner, you would have got the paint job quicker than this. And everybody laughed, right? And you just diffused the whole thing, the helicopter thing, and the fact that she was late, the fact that everyone's making a big deal,
and the difference between her standing socially and the audience as well, right? Bridge that gap.
Yeah, she bridged that. It was all beautiful. And then my favorite moment of all, it was, oh God, I really shouldn't tell this one. and she said, all right, I was going to do a speech, but I think you probably got questions. So, I'm just going to open it up for questions and we'll answer them. So anyone got questions, people put their hands up. And then she said, by the way, I have done so many of these. I can tell the difference between a question that you have, that has been primed to ask versus a real question. So be aware of that before you ask the question. And all the hands went down.
Wow.
I really shouldn't tell that story. So I was just like, oh my goodness. So was that a masterclass on how to do a presentation? Was it the best speech that I ever heard? No. Was it a masterclass on how to bring the audience into your world and be able to make that connection? Absolutely. It's like, because every technique that I use, I just watched her do within the first 5 minutes. And I was just like, I was blown away. I was like, oh my goodness.
Well, it's an interesting take on leadership as well, because I think if she had done that to an external audience, they're saying the thing about, by the way, I know the difference between a real question, that could have been a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
But what she really is trying to say is, I want to hear genuine questions.
Yeah.
And I know you all think I'm important, so you prepared any question last night because you knew you should ask a question. But tell me or ask me, what do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
It was just brilliant. It really was. And I was just in awe. And I was just like, yeah, that's fine. And I think probably the other one that I really liked was probably my old professor, Professor Al Durrell, when I was at Stirling Uni. He's now at St Andrews. And I remember he came in one day, and he was a brilliant presenter. He was just funny and, really engaging to learn from. And he came in and he had probably the largest stick I've ever seen. It was like 12 foot or something like that. And he waved this thing across the entire lecture theater, right? And everybody's ducking their heads and stuff like that. And he's going, and he just turned around and he said, I'm not allowed to use this thing. And he had his laser pointer because I might be able to take somebody's eye out. And then he started waving this thing around again. I just loved it. I was just like, yeah, it's not about, here's my formal presentation.
Yeah.
It's about making that connection, being human. And I know this is an episode about AI, but it's about being human and making that connection and making you feel something. And that's, don't ask me what they presented that day in both cases or what any of those questions. Right. I don't know, right? But I know how I felt, and in those cases, they felt great. So
tell us about your YouTube channel.
My YouTube channel is, I'm not here to promote my YouTube channel, but my YouTube channel is for techies. I'm pretty sure that if you're watching this, you probably shouldn't be watching my YouTube channel. It's probably not for you. I tend to just go into AI or programming stuff. I will get my keyboard out and we'll code something up and I'll show a new technology and a new AI model working. That is it. It's pretty small. I think it's just about 25,000 subscribers at the moment. I do everything that I shouldn't do as a YouTube creator. I know that I shouldn't do it. So if I wanted to be a very highly successful YouTube creator, I would keep it to something like 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at the most. I would be punchy. I wouldn't go deeper. I would be high level for the general audience. I'd be consistent in my posting once a week, blah, blah, blah. I do none of that. I will spend 45 minutes talking about a topic you don't care about. So I did one recently on, I think it was like an old internet protocol called Telnet. And how to use it with AI. Nobody cares about it, and it's fine because I needed to do that video, and it's okay, whereas other videos, if it's a popular tech trending topic, then on AI, then it will do very well. And I know which videos trending wise will do well, which ones don't, but I don't care. It's about, my channel is really about trying to provide that value and go that one level deeper. And to me, honestly, it doesn't matter how many people watch or not, as long as somebody somewhere, is getting value. And if they don't, I've got value from creating it in the first place. So if there are people who watch my YouTube channel, thank you. And please keep watching. Hopefully you find it useful. But honestly, I suspect in that Venn diagram, there's not a lot of people.
But if there is someone, where do they find you?
Just type in Chris Hay UK into Google and you will find my YouTube channel. You will find pretty much everything about me.
Before we say goodbye, any final words of wisdom for this audience?
For this audience, AI feels like a scary thing. It is not. It is just something to experiment and play with. I genuinely think that if you are trying to pitch to somebody, using AI tools to help you build your presentation, to be able to question it, to be able to get the mindset of your audience, will genuinely help you. Just stop short of having the AI generate the whole thing for you. Still apply your uniqueness, your humanness to it, your unique point of view, because people don't want to hear what an AI thinks. They want to hear what you think. But use the AI to help you get that message out that might have been hard for you to do. So don't think of it as a replacement. Think of it as a tool, and you've got a messy garden at the moment, and that garden is your story, and the shears are there to help you trim that to be something beautiful that you can be proud of. That's where it can help you.
Brilliant. Wise words indeed. Thanks very much for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Again, I'm not sure that your audience will really want to hear what I'm saying.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Cheers.
Thanks. You have been listening to Pitch Masters with me, your host, Danny Fontaine. You can find me on social media, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just search for Danny Fontaine or Pitch Guy for exclusive clips from behind the scenes and from the show. You can also find where to order my book, Pitch, How to Captivate and Convince Any Audience on the Planet, by searching on Google or visiting pitchguy.co.uk, where you'll also find additional resources and a newsletter to sign up to for exclusive content. As always, thank you so much for listening. Your support means absolutely everything to me, and feel free to reach out to me via my website as well. I absolutely love to hear great stories about incredible pitches. So, until next time, catch you later.